looks like it's redoing. Okay. So first step, I mentioned we're going to do in inches, right? And you can set these defaults up to your preferences, and just so you know, your preferences go with you. Whenever you log into Fusion on your thing, whether it's a school computer or your home thing, everything that you set as you pin things on toolbar or whatever, it goes with you. So in this case, I set my preferences to always open up files in millimeters, but I want to change this, and I just want to show you because this is kind of awkward. If I go to document settings, which is the little gear icon, and then hover over, you see if I go to units and just click on it, nothing happens, but you have to hover over it, and then the new little icon appears to the right, and then you got to scooch over to that one and then click it, and now I can change from millimeters to inches. Just say okay. And when you do this in Rhino, for example, it starts with just these random units. They're not actual anything. So when you change from inches to millimeters, your scale gets all whacked out. This will keep your whatever scale stuff. If you start in one and switch over and keep on working, that's fine. You can go back and forth. You could also type any dialog box in. You could just put like 4 mm for millimeters or IN for inches. So even if you've got it set one, you could still enter stuff as, all right, so I got my inches set up. Now I'm gonna close that. And then I wanna bring in that canvas like we did last time for the ducky. And so I'm gonna go over to, so I haven't really done anything yet, and it's probably a good idea just to get into saving, because this is untitled. So first time I go Command S or save or whatever, it will prompt me where I want this and everything. So we'll call this, all right, and then notice the location. I've got all CCA Metacad, Brian's work, so it's in the right place. If that's not correct, just click the arrow and navigate to where, and like I said, if you get stuck and you can't open that other folder, don't worry about it for now. It's all right, so I'm in the right place, and I'll just hit save. And I've done stuff for like 2 hours and forgot to save it once, and it crashes and I lose everything, so it is good to save regularly. So now we got to go to Insert Canvas, and then navigate to wherever you downloaded that screenshot. So I'm saying insert from my computer, because I can have these screenshots in Fusion in my the Fusion folders don't have to just be Fusion files. They could be graphics or PNGs, decals, whatever. This just happens to be on my desktop. So there it is, open that up. And then again, we did this last with the ducky, but I'll just kind of reiterate here. I'm going to click on the side panel because I noticed this says front, and so this is the way I want to work. And there's my shark, and I mentioned that I wanted 4 inches. I actually don't need to scale this. Notice that the scale itself is the whole panel, but actually really what I want to do is make sure the 4 inches is like, let's say, from nose to tail. So at this point, this actually doesn't really matter too much. I'm just going to plop it there, and I'm going to flip this horizontally just because my other shark was in that orientation. And you can flip it upside down, right, left, top to bottom. And then this is scaling the whole thing. I don't want to do this where I'm stretching it. I don't think that would ever be something whoops, God, dug it. Repeat canvas, sorry, I accidentally deleted it. And a lot of times when you're working in, whoops, I did the wrong one. Oop, okay, here we go. The first dialog box is always, you can't do anything until you select a plane where that's gonna go. And I selected that little orange mid-plane. Okay, so I got this in here. Now I want to calibrate it. So first I just plopped it there. Now I'm going to calibrate it. So I'm going to go, once you put a canvas in there, you get a new folder in your browser. And your browser may be closed with this little button. It may look like that. It may have torn off, like the other day. It was like way over here. I don't know how that happened. If that happens, you just open it up and drag it over and push it up against the edge of the screen, and then, whoops, do that again. And you'll see a little green bar appears, and then it snaps back into its default position. So canvases, I'm gonna open that up. There's my screenshot. And if I right click on that, I wanna calibrate this now. And what calibrate does is if I click on 2 points, I'll click here and here, and then it gives me a dimension. And so I think I said 4 inches. And so now that's exactly 4 inches. All right, so I'm gonna, before we go too much further, I'm gonna check on you guys, make sure you're all of these there. Looking good. Looking good. Looking good. Looking good. Shucks. Oh. Why do that? Oh, click on where it says right. Just wants to click right on the side. No, click it though, again. Oh, go click down, right click again, and then see where it says photographic. Go click on that. So what's happening is I have mine on, here I'll show you, please. This is in preferences, but some of you might have, if you see these little icons that are down floating at the bottom, if you click on that, there's one that says camera. And if it's on perspective, you'll see something like that. You go back to camera, and I like perspective with ortho faces, and what that means is that as soon as I rotate it, I'm in perspective, but if I click on any of these views, it snaps into orthographic view, so you see it a little differently, and it's just a little easier to work in orthographic mode. All right, so I've calibrated, I've got here, this is the front view, and incidentally, if you ever get stuck, and I couldn't figure this out for the longest time, let's say I did this on the, that this was the view that I put this in, and this is the top view. You can reset these. So like if I click on this, you could say, set current view as front or top, or reset this as the front. I'm not gonna do that right now, but I've had to use that before. All right, so we got our Sharky, and in the, don't do this. In one of the videos, you'll see me, this is where it got a little too long, is that I went to my create form. You could do that because we're in a create form. But instead of starting with a primitive shape, like a cylinder or whatever, I was showing you guys how to, you can do this with individual faces. And so in one of the videos, why is this not working now? You'll see I'm clicking on like making individual panels that are snapped to each other. And this is all great, and I seem to have some grid setting on. Don't snap to grid. So I could manually go through and still snap to grid. What the heck? What is going on? So I'm manually making panels, and then I can go in 3D and start editing these and pulling more panels out and everything. This just, I think we're too early in the game to do it this way. But I'm explaining this to you because one of the videos shows you going through this whole process. Instead, what I think I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna use a tube to begin with. So I'm gonna go over, now this is where you're gonna follow me, create cylinder. Click on that. And in this case, the shark is kind of coming at us. So we want the cylinder base is really going to be, if you rotate this around to the front view, click on that panel, and then click on to start this, click on the dead center and kind of drag it out. It's a little hard to see in this view, but you basically want to just get this cylinder started roughly the size of the body of the shark. We can increase it, if you're a little bit off, we can increase it and stuff later. Now, as far as all these options that we got here, diameter faces is 8, and I'll explain later, but 8 is actually a good number. It closes up really nicely. Let's see, height faces. Okay, so height faces is this. So the diameter is all the way around. The height faces are these. And you can use these little sliders to change those, or you can enter numbers in the dialog box. In this case, I'm going to start with just one face. And so, like I said, I could grab this one and add more or less. And so I'm just going to zoom out to 1, or I could type it in right here and just type 1, either way. And that's all I want to start with, is this piece. And then, because we started on the dead center, I'm going to scoot this up a little bit, just with my edit, to kind of like right around where, in fact, I'm going to make it more or less as wide as the shark fin up above, and say, okay. And then I'm going to turn on that symmetry, just like we did with the duck. So I'm going to click on this mirror internal, and 2 panels right next to each other to get that little green line will show me that I got symmetry on. And once again, I'll come around and check. You guys are at least there. And if you accidentally click and you've got 4 panels, just double click some of those loops and delete them.
Calibrate.
Oh, okay, sorry. So first of all, you can always close this browser if you get more real estate, so click on the waffle, and then right click on image. And then click once and twice and then type it. Oh, good, oh, good. All right, so I want the shark to have just a little bit more of, I don't want him totally round. And I was looking at some sharks, and in my original one, I'm just starting to kind of basically build the cross section. So I moved this down. It's also, I didn't really get into in the videos talking about draft and molding and stuff. And so, but if I flatten out the bottom a little bit, and then the fins come off there, it's going to make it a lot easier to make that split in the body without creating major undercuts. And let me see if I have my little sharky again. So if you look at kind of head on to this guy, he's kind of flat on the bottom, and then the little fins are going to come out low on there. And then the top is more rounded. So the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make them slightly triangular. Just slightly, not terribly, but so something like that. Again, give them a little more personality instead of just, so the form environment is great for this kind of sculpting stuff, where we're making things that aren't mathematical. So this is kind of down to the personality of like what you want that shark to look like. What's your design style, whatever. So there's all kinds of ability to make this your own thing. All right, so again, I'm going to kind of think about this as working inside out. So I'm not going to worry about the fins yet. I'm just making the main kind of fuselage. So the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to double click this ring on the back, and this time I'm going to pull out one long section, and I'm going to hold down the option. I'm going to pull it almost all the way to the just a little bit shy of the very end. And then I'm going to use that central little button on this thing to shrink it way down. And yeah, it's probably okay. And then I'm going to hit okay. Now, I want another line in between here, but this is actually easier to do the big pass and then add a line in there than it is to try to shrink halfway and then shrink again. So if I add another loop in here, let me go to box mode just to show you. So I've made this big long pass, and then if I modify, insert edge, and I double click this, it's actually the center loop, and then drag this down to like 0.5, it's negative 0.5. Then you see that whole taper stayed the same. I didn't have to try to manually match that up. And then actually, if I'm looking at my underlay, I can see that this one's actually just slightly smaller. So now I'll scale this down a little bit. So it kind of tapers in and then kind of continues on. And again, I'm using this center one, but I could use the bars. I can move things up and down. And I think I used to do all this stuff without sketches and just start, but the sketches actually speeds everything up because I don't have to keep reevaluating whether or not this looks good. I can just look at the sketch and go, all right, I've already approved the sketch, so I just gotta make it match. Okay, so let's see. Are we got a little taper?
Yeah, I could make the, I don't have my shortcuts last time, so I'm using any set of shortcut to do the box mode.
Oh,
Is that good?
you're in Windows?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think it's Alt 1 on Windows. Yeah.
Oh, it's all, okay.
And then Alt 3.
Is there a way to make a shortcut too? Because I wanted to set the orbit to one of these buttons.
If you could put in keyboard shortcuts in your,
That's what I want.
then Alt 1 and Alt 3. But if you have to actually select the funny thing is I can't figure out how to get there. I know there's somewhere in here that actually has that. I can't remember where it is. Let's see, wait, insert select, inspect. Oh, here it is. Okay, so under utilities, display mode, if you click on that, then you've got first is box mode, second is the combo, and then third is smooth. But so that's not giving you actually keyboard shortcuts. I think if you could program in Alt 1 and Alt 3 into your thing, that would be.
No, yeah, that's working. I just wanted to set something else.
Okay, so you keep coming around. Yeah, click on that and then just drag it the other way. Because you've already got two in here, so yeah, that is kind of weird. Just hit OK. Delete that. Just hit the delete key right now. Okay, now double click on this one instead, and then shrink that one down. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. And then add the next one back in. Yeah, if you hold down the option, it adds another piece. So if you're dragging it, it'll actually keep the old one and make a new one. If you don't hold down the option, it'll just manipulate it. All right, so now we're going to work on the front, and actually I'm going to jump over to this shark just for a minute, go all the way back and edit this first. And you see all these ghosts? Those are like, that's the future of what this file is. So this little ghosty guy, but I do have my my original shark, and you can see even the ghost, I moved it. Come on, why is this not working? There we go. So I just wanted to look at the face again to remember how I managed this transition. So after the fin, I mean where the fin is, we're going to pull out one more line, and then, interesting, okay. So can you see, this is a little bit interesting. Forget the little lips for a minute. But so we're like right there. We're gonna pull out one, we're gonna pull out another, and then we're gonna just pull a part out from the top and connect it. So let's jump back over here. So first off, we gotta pull one more section out. So I'm gonna go to my edit form and hold down Option to drag more surface out. And then don't hold Option to manipulate the scale of it. And then hold down, I'm gonna hold the arrow and Option again, click on this one and pull out this next section. And then this is where it starts getting a little tricky. And maybe I'm gonna squish this only in with this upper bar, not with the center one, because I don't want his face to come to a little point. I want it to be nice and wide, because they got those big jowls. And then I'll just say okay for now. And so you should have like this, where where the upper fin is, there should be now 2 more loops, panels after the fin. And when I did it this way, as opposed to starting with individual little panels and doing it, it's so much faster and also a lot smoother. You can just see that right now, like just look at the highlights and stuff, that this thing is like nice and smooth. And when I looked at a lot of the models from the previous one, they were very wonky. So the trick also is, because we started with that kind of tubular cross section and we pulled these sections out, is to try to not move individual panels around anymore, because it's nice and smooth. And if I look at it in box mode, it all makes kind of sense. And what like if I just grab one piece and manipulated that, it throws the entire thing off. And now I've got this kind of wave in here. And maybe I want to do that, but try to keep everything, once you put it, just leave it alone unless you need to move anything. And also you notice I started with that cross section. I tried to get the cross section, the very beginning move we did, in the basically cross-sectional look that I want, and then started pulling all the stuff out of there instead of making a big long tube and then trying to adjust all of it. I only had to adjust one, and it kind of repeats itself. All right, so we got here. Now this is the tricky part. So basically this point right there is going to be the corner of the mouth, and it's reflective. So I just picked one. Maybe I'm going to push this back a little bit just to start with. And then maybe I'll grab this lower part and push this forward. And let's get it in the side view so we can kind of see forward and up. And notice that I'm only grabbing one panel on the bottom. I'm not grabbing it all the way around. So basically I'm just making the lower jaw. And I can see that this is needing to come over a little further. So I'm just trying to match the sketch below. This needs to come up a little bit. And then we'll start building the face. So I'm going to jump back over to the other one just again to look, and so I think what I did, if you look at this laser pointer, just scooch it down. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this line and that one, actually all the way around, because they won't, if I just grab the two on one side and I pull out a piece, they won't actually be welded together. So I'm going to grab this one, that one, the next one, and the next one around. And then we'll option pull out a section, and then we'll stitch this last little piece together with a new one panel, so you'll see in a second here. So what that means is that I'm going to grab this, and then on the other side as well. So you should select 4 edges, but none of the lower jaw. And then go your edit, and then option again. And I'm going to use this little square to pull this out, because I'm kind of going to go down, and then I'm going to use the bar, horizontal bar, to scale it down in that dimension. And pull this out, and maybe I'll rotate this a little bit just to try to get close to the nose. And I think I gotta, once I stitch this together, it's gonna change the form, so I don't wanna spend too much time fussing with it yet. So I've gotta hit OK before I can, and click off of those lines so that, yeah, I can see I probably need to move these around, but let's just do this last piece. So I'm just grabbing one panel right now, just the side. And I'll stop in a second and come and check. And in this case, I'm gonna pull it towards the center. So option, pull this new little piece to the center. And this looks terrible, but when I weld it all together, you'll see it looks better. Now, because I have symmetry on, the welding will automatically go to the center point, so I don't need to get them close to each other. And then this point is going to weld to this upper point here, and because it's symmetry, they'll both connect. So let's just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to hit modify and go down to weld. Weld, where is it? Here, weld vertices. And so the vertices are the little dots. And sometimes it's a little confusing on if I'm only welding vertices, then what about the edges? But the edges just follow suit. So notice this one I welded and it kind of connected. This one I'm going to click one and then click the other side, and then it just automatically stitches all that together. And again, I can see the corners of the mouth I need to move, but that's the general idea. So let's hit OK so we get out of the weld, and then just go and look at your underlying sketch. I'm going to click the center line and pull that out a little bit. And then these side edges look too far out, so I'll pull those in. And I think I actually pulled this upper part out to kind of square off the nose a little bit. And maybe one right back before it. And then the tricky part is, like, I'm trying to make a toy shark, so I want him to be happy little shark, but trying to get this very small amount of panels to look like a smile. And right where the corner of the mouth is, it's got some weird wiggly stuff, but once I thicken this, the tensions will be different, and it should clean up that little part. Let's see, Control 1. And maybe part of this is that this panel right behind it needs to pull back just a little bit to ease off some of that tension. And also, this is where I really should have a bunch of scrap images of sharks so that I can keep referencing this. So now you can see my box mode. I kind of messed this up a little bit, probably too much. So and don't feel bad about spending a lot of time fussing with individual points, because that's a huge part of this, is just a little bit in, a little bit out. Now imagine a guy, who made a clay sculpture of a car, and they're down there scraping off one little micron of clay going, oh, that looks so much better. So moving a point just incrementally can sometimes make a big difference. see which one looks best or which one has the right tension or whatever. Because I've done this before, I know this will work, but like I know this corner of the mouth is a little bit weird, and there might be some alternate way to do this where it's a little more, where I have a little bit more control over that smile. All right, so let's go to the back. Now we did all that welding on the front, but this back one's gonna be maybe a little simpler. So let's use, are you guys all set here? I'm gonna show you a couple different ways to do this. One, I could just take two of these panels and then drag them out and weld them all together, kind of like we did the front. But I'm gonna use this shortcut called fill hole, which is, I don't know if you could see that, it's somewhere down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things down on the modify. And so I get this dialog box, and there's a couple options. If I double click on this, you'll notice that I've got this, do you see how there's no lines on this? It just kind of made this big multi-shaped parachute looking thing. That's fill star. I've got reduce star, which will try to close it in four-sided panels, but you can see that this bottom, it makes kind of a mess. And then I've got collapse, which will come to a point. But the problem is that, like I was kind of trying to explain to you, it likes these kind of four-way intersections. This has got a whole bunch of points coming together, so this usually fails when I do this. So either you can do this and say, okay, and delete 4 of the lines and clean it up. Or what I actually do instead is I use this fill star because there's no lines, and I'll say, okay, and then I'll just add the ones in I want. And this seems to work a little cleaner than trying to clean up the other one. So just grab the end, click fill star, we'll get this thing. Or first fill hole and then fill star. And then watch me just for a second because this is kind of important. I made this mistake. If I go from one side to the other, sometimes it's smart enough to know that it's a mirror image, but I'm actually crossing over the mirror line, so sometimes it'll actually make 2 lines on top of each other. So the first, what I always do is I'm going to go to, what is it again? Insert point, which also seems a little misleading because I really want to insert an edge, but 2 points make a line. So I'm going to insert a point from the top to the bottom down the symmetry line, and say, okay, that's the first one you have to do because now I split that symmetry into 2 halves. And now for the second one going to the center, I only need to do half because it will reflect because it's got symmetry on. So let's do that again, insert point. And now I'm gonna skip 1 line and go to this kind of middle one and go more or less from point to point on the center. And then you'll see that it jumped and did the other side for me. And technically, these are all 4-sided panels. So when you do 8 sides going around, you can close it up with 4 4-sided panels. And that's why this is generally, if you're going to start something that's a loop, 8 sides is good because I can close this up really clean like this. And so this is a nice 4-way intersection. These are 4-sided panels. We do have these Y-shaped things, but notice they're already Y-shaped. Which is good, not T-splines, T-shaped, which can lead to problems. Now, I gotta shrink this all down because remember I said this is gonna actually be the inside of the shark and then we're gonna thicken this to the outside. So I think what I need to do is look at this, and first I'm gonna do this backside. So this looks too thick here, so I'm just gonna shrink this down. Because I got a little too much meat in there. Yeah, that's probably good. And then I'm going to take the whole entire shark body by double clicking it. And in this case, I don't want uniform scale because it's actually, I want to scale it in this direction, but the length is so long, the length would shorten up if I did it uniform. So I'm going to use the bars instead to do this kind of one at a time, meaning that I'm going to use the horizontal bar and just shrink it a little bit. just so I can kind of get a little visual thickness on there. And then I'm gonna use the vertical bar and shrink that, whoa, come on, just a little bit. And actually move this forward. So again, we're gonna make it a little bit thicker than, and if you didn't do this stage, that's probably fine, because it just means the shark will be slightly bigger. And then I'm just gonna kind of go through here and make sure that this feels like I'm sort of matching my underlay. The other thing that's kind of nice about 8 panels is that even from a total side view, I can really access every panel. There's none that are hidden from view. Okay, and then jumping ahead here, but housekeeping tips. One thing I always do is double click the body and then use this repair body that should be up in your toolbar. If it's not there, click on this and repair body. And this should probably not do anything, but when you've made extensive changes and stuff, sometimes there's subtle little problems that will show up. So right now, this is showing me the star points. There's no T-points, which is good. And there's no panels that are 5 or 3 sides, or anything less or more than 4. And I just do this on a regular basis, and then I hit this little auto repair. And like I said, nothing happened here because he's all good. So that also gives me a little confidence that the body's nice and good. Now, there's another thing I can do, is if you go under the same utilities and you go to this make uniform, this is very mysterious. I don't quite understand it, but again, you can see, like, here's an example. Sometimes you're doing all this stuff and you get these lines that in box mode, they don't look like they're close together, but then in smooth mode, they're all kind of crunched up. And you hit make uniform and it spaces everything back out. And I don't really know exactly what it's doing, but let's just try it. So make uniform, and I think this is clean and everything. I don't think it's going to change much, but I'm also going to say, just by habit, click on this convert T-points. Whenever I have a model fail, it's because of a T-point. So I just try to avoid those. And then watch real carefully when I hit OK and see if this actually changes. Yeah, it did. Did you notice that? Here, let's undo it. Watch the lines. Do you see that? Wait, let's redo it. Repeat. Make uniform. Oops, now it won't do it because I don't have the body selected. Utilities, make uniform. Okay, ready? Boop. So somehow it's relaxing all these weird tensions and things that are on there and kind of spacing things out a little bit. And so that's also another good thing to, every once in a while, especially if your model starts looking weird and not behaving like you think it should. And anytime you see a line that's going from one point to another and it has some wiggle in it, then something's wrong. Like there's a little wiggle in the front, whereas it's mouth, but that's because that ends right there and we've purposely created some tension. But I've done this before where you'll see that the lines kind of do these kind of jogs in the middle, then you need to repair it and make uniform. Now there's one other thing you could do, is if you weren't really convinced that your thing is as smooth as possible, you could go under this smooth command and smooth out things. But I think this might, and notice that as soon as I click on that, everything disappears. And so, and I don't understand this either, but look at, I have to manually click each panel, or I think if I hit command, no. Yeah, so it's kind of weird. It's not, I might be able to drag across. Yeah, now I'm unclicking. So I don't understand why it does it this way, but let's just take this whole body and we'll add a little smoothing and see what, actually I'll add a lot and see what it does. You see it changed the shape a little bit? It's not quite conforming to my thing anymore. So again, for this is super simple shape, it's not really necessary, but when you got a complex thing, you might want to try that. Okay, so now I think we're ready for offsetting this. Yeah, let's just do it. Okay, so double click the body, go under modify and say thicken, which should be way down near the bottom. And like I said, if we did this calibrated properly and we're in inches, I would do like 0.8 inches. Or you could do 0.1, or sorry, 0.08. Let's just do 0.1. That'll make them a little thicker and it'll give you a little more wiggle room. So 0.1 inches. Whoa, that's really thick. But let's take a look. And then before I hit OK, I also want to make sure, notice up here it says thick and tight, and the sharp edges, that will make crispy edges. It's mostly around the mouth that we have an open edge. And then the directions are all blah, blah, blah. I think this is all good. But I don't want sharp edges on the mouth. I want to make this a soft edge. And we'll hit OK. And then now you look at it, and that soft edge just adds this nice clean radius to the edge. And now technically, this is a little bit thicker than the one that we started with because we've got both sides. And here, let's just, for fun, let's go into inspect, section analysis, and then click on the central plane, and whoops, and then you can see inside the two layers. So it's really, you know, it's connected at the mouth. It's not two individual layers. It's really one big looping surface that goes in and out. But so now, let's say if I were to think, and I do think, that it looks a little thick in the back. I like that kind of concave and convex. So if I just went, if I just selected the one outer ring and said, okay, I'm going to change that and squeeze that back in, this is what I'm talking about. Now my inner wall thickness has changed. So I want to make sure everything's all groovy before I do this. But I can get away sort of with this. If I select both of these at the same time, I can kind of do a little bit of manipulation. I think that's all I really need to do is that much. So I think I can get away with that. And now I've got my section analysis on, and so if it made a new folder here called analysis, and if I click that off, you'll see that now I got my full guy, and yeah, I'll leave my thing on. Okay, and save. And once again, I'm going to check out this. Or actually, I'm going to do this a little bit different. If you have a problem, come to me first. So is anybody having issues thickening it up? Okay. That's good? That's good? Click that little eyeball off of the now. No, the one. Yeah, and then you can click off the ordinate. So, good? Yeah, good.
How do you select in section analysis?
So yeah.
I want to do section analysis.
Oh, and then you have to click up front.
Yeah, so how did you select?
Oh, so hit OK. So that just stays there. And so click the other shift and the other one. Yeah. And then when you want to turn that back off, it's going to be in this analysis folder. So you can just click on the eyeball in the folder and then toggle back and forth. So a lot of times,
yeah,
I have to keep, especially when you're doing stuff inside, you can't see it. So I have to use that.
Yeah.
think in this has to be.
Yeah, just showing the box mode. When it's, yeah, you're good. Good. Okay, cool. So we gotta add the, let me see what time it is. I'm gonna take this, this is great that this is once a week class so we can get way deeper into stuff. But I'm just gonna take this as far as we can go today, and then we might be able to split it up and get it all ready, but let's finish the fins right now, and then, so the way I did this before is I pulled the main shark fin, this top one out, and the rear. I think in one of the videos I made it as a separate piece and just merged them, but I think we could pull this out of this area. And then the two side fins I just made as separate objects and kind of merged them into the body. Did a little merging and trimming later. So let's start with this top fin. Okay, so this is an area where I'm going to add some new panels on here to be able to pull this out properly. So if we did this correctly, we've already got a loop at the end and a loop at the beginning of this fin. And if those aren't quite in the right place, you could move them a little bit if you need to. Like, if I needed a little bit more here, I could just grab this loop and push it forward. And it's going to change my wall thickness inside a little bit, but I've got some room for error. And so I want to pull this out kind of a tight section in the middle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that insert point thing that we just did for the closing up the fin, the back. And I'm going to insert a new little panel line that's pretty close to the center line on one side of the center. And this is where you'll see that this is a T-point, where those lines that I just made come and meet this loop. They created a intersection that's a T intersection. And as I mentioned before, that's usually where things fail. And you notice as soon as I hit done, it kind of changed the geometry of the body slightly, and it's a little more pointy and stuff. And so I want to convert those into star points. And so the shortcut now is that we just did this. If I just double click on the whole body and go to that make uniform and then just click this little convert T-points thing, it will convert all of them into star points for me. And so that's actually faster than going through and kind of individually doing it. But if you wanted to individually, and notice that how much it changed the body. So I'll show you also how you would individually do it, is I would go to repair body, select this body, and then you see everywhere it says T. If I click on that, and then it fails because one side's a T point and the other's a star point until I click both sides. And since it's mirrored, it gets both sides for me. So either way to do it, I think that new make uniform, remove T-points is way quicker, smoother, faster. Okay, and then now I want to start pulling the shark fin out. And again, the least amount of panels will keep it nice and smooth. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to click on both sides of this again, because watch, if I just click one side and try to pull out a fin, it's actually pulling out two fins. And that looks pretty weird, right? So I want to click both sides so that they're both blue. And then I'm going to carefully pull out just one small, I call this like the landing pad. And so before I pull the main fin out, I'm just going to kind of adjust this little landing pad. And so I'm going to angle it back a little bit. And this might be easier to see in box mode. So, and you see how it's square coming up, even though it doesn't look that way in the smooth mode. And so I'm going to shrink it forward and back, just so it's kind of like a little trapezoid. And then left to right, shrink it a little bit. And then also I'm going to flatten it down so it's kind of a nice, like just think of this as a little foundation that we're going to build the rest of the fin. So it looks something like this in box mode. tapered in. Now I'm gonna pull out the next section, and and again, I'm doing this in box mode because I think it's just a little clearer. And here I'm gonna concentrate a lot on the kind of coming to this point. So notice I squeezed it down and then I moved it back. And then I'm also gonna rotate this so it's kind of heading backwards. And then just, kind of going around. And I could use that, the little central thing to shrink it in all directions, but I find it's much better to do it individually. How wide do I want it? How long do I want it? How, to have a little bit more control. And so now I'm going to pull the last little piece out, and I might have to go look at this in the smooth mode in a minute, but because the fin actually kind of curves backwards a little bit. And I noticed one other thing I made, this is where, when I was talking about creating the foundation, the one thing I didn't do, which I forgot, is that center line on the foundation. I should pull those out a little bit, because this front of the fin, if we look at that, it's pretty square. And so we want it to be a little bit more, so basically I'm gonna just grab this whole front edge and pull this just a little bit forward, and then I'm going to grab the whole back edge of just the fin. Actually, I think just this, and this, and pull that backwards. And so if I go to the side view and look at this, and if I could see these kind of panels going all the way around, that tells me that it's going to have a uniform thickness. Now, the ones in the front are a little thinner. That means they're less round. This back side will be a little more tapered. But let's just take a look at it. And again, actually, I probably should be looking at real sharks. So Control 3. And you can see what's happening here, even though these, the lines that the foundation that we built was pretty close to the body, the tension is pulling that a little bit further up than we think. But this is the part where, when you watch those highlights roll around there, this would be so hard to do in any other program, to get all this curvature continuity and perfect inner surfaces. And if I wanted that little intersection from fin to body to be a little more tight, then technically I should just be able to move this down a little bit to tighten up that intersection. And this is up to you. This is where you're now I kind of like that big smooth transition, so I'm going to leave it where it was, but I got to fix the tip of this a little bit more. So I'm not sure, maybe if I just bring this one edge way up, and this front one a little forward. And again, this is where that sketch really comes in handy, because now I can zoom way in and match things instead of trying to go, does this look good? Is the proportions right? And again, my objective here is that this is going to be a toy, so I do want it to be nice and soft. If anybody stepped on a Lego in the middle of the night in your bare feet, you kind of know what I'm talking about. And this guy will, depends on what this is made out of, but this is like a landmine. If you think about it, it's got the two fins on the side that pretty much any way you drop it, something's going to be sticking up. And so if you did step on this, unless it was made out of soft material, it would be very painful. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. I think that looks good. And then now if I look at my cross-section, my analysis, that I made before, you'll see that the body inside, the hollow, whatever, doesn't go up into this fin, and so we don't have to worry about intersecting surfaces and stuff. And you know, technically I should be a little concerned about how thick that is, but I can just measure it. So here, I'll show you, let's see. So I'll turn off my analysis. So let's see how thick this is. The rest of the body is 0.1. So if I just grab this measure tool, and let's say I'll click this line and the one on the other side, and it tells me this is 0.126. So my main body is 0.1, so it's just a little bit thicker than my main body. So I think I'm okay with that. And I'm guessing as I moved up on the fin, it's probably going to be thinner because we scaled it in a little bit. So I'm going to use my measure again. And this measure tool is just kind of a temporary thing. It just pops up, gives you your dimension, and then goes away. It's not something to mark out dimensions. So this one's now 0.089, so it's a little bit thinner than my main body. So I could thicken that up if I wanted to. In fact, here, I'm going to show you a little trick. Let's say I wanted this to be exactly 0.1 between the two. So let me measure that one more time. I'm going to measure this side. Whoops, I'm getting panels. Measure that side to this side. And I've got 0.089. Write that down. 0.089. And I want it to be 1, or sorry, 0.1. And so the trick is divide what you want by what you have. So if I go into my, and I just always use Siri, what is 0.1 divided by 0.089?
The answer is approximately 1.1235.
Okay, so there's my answer. So that means now is if I go into this loop mode and I want to increase this sideways, and notice it says 1 right now. If I increase this to 1, here I could just type it in, 1.1235, and say, okay, now technically this should be a lot closer to 0.1. So this side to that side. Yeah, and this is a curve, so it's not, it's actually measuring the points, but 0.096, I was closer, but theoretically that should be exactly how much more I want. So just remember, always divide what you want by what you have. Okay, and then once you got your fin in there, save it. And notice every time I hit save, it says user saved. You could just ignore that, but the idea here is that if I were going to do something radical and I said pre-fins or something or other, I could easily find where I last saved it before I put the fins on there. And if I go into my browser here, here's my shark. If you see the little V2 next to it, if you click that little arrow, it gives me my history. Here's all my saves. Like I said, user saves. This is where if I knew what I needed, I could actually go back to that point and push that up to the top, basically reset it to that mode. So it's kind of nice as far as if everything goes to hell, you can always go back to when things were good. Kind of like, 3 years ago when everything went to hell. Wouldn't that be nice just to go back to that moment and restart? Let's see, 213. All right, so let's do the rear fin in a similar manner, but we got to add some more panels on here. And again, I should look at some sharks to see. I think what happens is this this little rear section, just the main body just blends into the tail. It's not like there's an airplane fuselage with a separate tail and a hump here. So I think what I'm going to try to do, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to add one more panel by just double clicking this previous one and using the oops, let me get this thing out of here. Modify, insert edge. Double click this one. And so I'm just getting another loop that's closer to the front of that fin. And then this is where I'm not sure if this is going to work, but I'm going to grab this and that side, and the back. And so I'm going to do one extrusion upward and one downward. So this is the upward one. And so here I think I'm just going to use this square and hold down Option and pull out, again, my foundation for the rest of the fin. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to go to box mode just so I can see this, and I can see, do you see how it kind of goes in and out and everything? So I'm going to set this up for a little bit better. And there's something weird going on here. What is going on here? Oh, I see, I gotta go up a little. What is happening? Oh, I see, I grabbed the line. I got too many pieces. Hold on. Here we go. I got some lines in there too for some reason. So let's back out. Maybe I'll try this before I even do this, I'm going to pull this way out and flatten this. I'm just going to start with something that's a little more. Okay, so there we go, much better. So, again, I'm kind of taking this. What's this doing? There we go. Ask me, yes.
How do you decide when you're going to add a new node or module, or whatever, like when you do the option drag versus?
A lot of it's just experience, but
Okay. I didn't know if there was like a theory behind what you're like. You just
kind
at a
of.
certain point.
Yeah, so like if I just said, all right, I want to make this into the fin, and I grabbed these and started pulling, what? Wrong arrow. Trying to pull these out. Notice that it pulls this whole section with this, so that's not going to work, right? So I know I need more geometry in this particular case. Now this is kind of weird because what I did is this was, this effectively is a square panel, but I smushed it down to more of a triangle, even though it still has 4 points, just to kind of flatten that area out so that I could start extruding out this fin. Let's see what it looks like before I go too much further. Control 3. So this seems like about right. The lower fin is going to pull a little tension on this as well, but let me come around. All right, so I'm going to pull out the bottom ones just like I did the top. I think I've got this all pre-set. Actually, well, yeah. And you probably notice that sometimes I work in box mode and sometimes in smooth mode. And I do find that the smooth mode will hide a lot of bad stuff sometimes. And so it's not bad to go check it out and make sure that things just look logical. It's a very interesting way to model, and a lot of people, the one that says, it likes it better when you think a computer program either is ones or zeros. What do you mean likes it better? And you start to use it and you start to kind of understand is like, it's a weird concept that the computer could like something better, but it just behaves better. It doesn't fail as often. It doesn't, and you'll also notice that anything that's on that center line, you can't move left and right. You can only move it in and out. And sometimes that makes things easier. I do think this little triangular manipulation tool would be nice if the panels were, you've got X, Y, and Z up by the navigation cube. Z is blue, X is red, and Y is green. It would be nice if those were colored so I could tell, like when you're in 3/4 view, sometimes you can't tell which arrow is the right one that you need or which panel. And I'm gonna start with I could do a little more massaging on this, but just in interest of time, I wanna start on the side wings. So I've got a little more manipulations to do to get this where I want it, and again, I just did a lot of new surfaces and stuff, so I'm just gonna run that auto repair just to make sure everything's all good. And I'm also going to use that make uniform, relax everything. And later I'll come back and match this up a little bit better to my drawing. But let's work on those little side fins for a minute. In fact, I'm going to select it, just one panel or anything, and then go into my bodies and turn. Now make sure you don't just turn off the folder bodies, just turn off that body. So now I just have my sketch. And then I'm gonna look at this and try to think out what's my best option here. So I'm gonna just do this with a couple faces. And so I'm going under create and then face. And what this does is it allows me to just draw one panel at a time. And I'm only going to do this with 2 panels, I think, to start with. So I want to make sure that this is in this first mode. And the reason is if it's in this mode, it actually won't let me start drawing. I need a panel to attach to, so I got to start with simple. And later, this object snap's really cool because we can actually make something follow a three-dimensional body, but I don't have anything in here. So now I can click on a plane to start, and then I should be able to, still can't draw. Why is this? What? Oh, I think, yeah, see, my problem is I'm clicking, there. I haven't set a plane yet, and my origins are out of the picture, so I gotta scroll out, select the side view plane. Now I should be able to draw. And so I'm just gonna kind of loosely, I think if I did this as one, four-sided panel, and then now that I'm in this, I've got one, I can click over to this edge, and what the edge does is I can just grab one edge, and that's basically 2 points. And then I can, maybe I'll do this and that. So that could be my, so let's just say, okay. Now this is a little weird because this inside corner looks all sharp because it's the edge of the object, but it'll smooth out once I connect it. But I'm not sure if that's really the right way to do this. Maybe what I need to do is move this all the way up to this edge, and move this one more to get the curve in there. And it depends on how kinked I want that corner there. I might add another panel in later, but let's start with just that. So once I've made this on that plane, I could double click it and then just rotate it off the plane and start moving it into position. And I'm going to turn the main body back on so I can see what I'm doing. And so I want this down, his fins don't come out of the side of his body, they come down kind of low near that, let's pull this out. And I don't know if I want to twist in this or not. I can rotate this in the other direction just for fun. And let's just see what happens. Okay, so I've got just 2 panels, and I'm going to use that thicken, modify, thicken, same thing. And this I'm going to do 0.1 and make sure it's on soft. And if you want it to go in the opposite direction, do -0.1, but this looks okay. And then now notice it smoothed everything out, all those weird pointy edges are gone. But it's not quite, maybe I just need to make this a little bigger. This loop. But ultimately, what I think I need another loop in here because this is starting to curve inward and I want it to curve outward. And so I'll double click this and say insert edge and push this way, pretty close to the body maybe. And I don't want that little bit of a curve there, so I think what I'll do is I'll just move this further inward so it's totally inside the body. And then it shouldn't and because I did thicken, it's equally thick, and that's fine, but I want the very end of it to be a little bit thinner than the base of it. So maybe I'll just pull this one down a little bit in this panel, maybe up a little bit. Control 2, whoops, Control 3. And the other body back on. quite where I want it. Let's pull this out. Maybe it's this. So remember that the tighter things are to each other, the more tension they're going to create. So I'm actually going to purposely move this one edge closer to here so I can get that little kind of return kick. But notice I probably should have done this before I thickened it, because now I'm starting to get some wobble in here, but I think that's actually okay. It looks a little organic.
What, wallowing?
I said wobbling. Just that the surface has kind of come up, and now that creates tension. It's creating a little lumpy surface there, but I think it's just mostly because, you know, if I look at it in this mode, sorry, having a lot of trouble getting this thing centered. Yeah, see how it jogs up really quickly?
Yeah.
So if I move that back down. So this is actually where in Gravity Sketch, when you're working in 3D, it's so much easier to see those things. Here, you have to just constantly keep moving around to different views. The other thing is, yeah, see like there, I could see this is a little bit off. I can turn on some of my analysis, so I'll show you that. So I'm going to go back into smooth mode, Control 3. So I think I straightened that out, but if I wanted to check this, if I go under Inspect and let's look at zebra analysis. Oops. Inspect zebra. And I want this. It's weird, it's not letting me. It won't let me approve this, but the point is that you can watch those little stripes and kind of see if there's any, especially if there's any sharp edges. There shouldn't be. But down here, I can see it makes a quick wiggle. So there's probably some smoothing I could do on the bottom. But again, this is supposed to be organic anyway, so I'm not going to, it's not an automobile. I think this whole thing could be just a little fatter this direction. All right, so how are we doing on time? Getting close, 20 minutes. Let's mirror this just so we can see what it looks like on the other side. So when you could still work on it, it'll update the mirrored mode. So now instead of the mirror symmetry internal, we want mirror duplicate and find that center plane. And notice that the center of origin is not there. But once I click on this mirror plane, it did pop back up. If it ever doesn't, you can always turn on origins with this little option. So I want to select that mirror plane, and now I've got the mirror mode. And if I manipulate one side, it will do the other side. And maybe we could throw the eyeballs on there. So just like the duck, just make some quad balls and move them into place. In this case, I usually probably would pick this view, so I'll do that, and then we'll merge it all together. So quad ball, and I could also do this in the solid environment, but so I got to select the plane again, and make the eye bigger than the visual part that you want to see, maybe twice as big, because you'll bury, like for humans, we're mostly seeing probably half of the actual diameter of your eyeball. So I'm going to move it into position here. I won't be able to see it because it's inside. And then I'll move to the front view and push it out until it just starts popping through. And then I'll mirror this as well. Symmetry. Okay, I'm going to do one last thing, and then I'll come and stop and check on you guys and stop this recording. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish form and merge all this together and show you how to. We still got to do this little slice to split the body, but this is technically 3D printable as is. So I'm going to hit finish form, and then everything changes. I'm going to turn off the canvas now because I don't need that. And then I'm going to merge everything together. So I'm going to say modify. And notice once I finish form, all the tools change. So now I'm in the solid menu under modify. And I want to combine this main body and the two eyes and the two fins. And make sure it says join. And that's it. Okay, so this I could 3D print right now. I'm done. But I want to show you one other kind of cool thing, is that if I cut this open or view inside, you'll see that that piece of the fin that I just stuck through there came through. But this is the beauty of Fusion. It's like if I got to do this on both sides, but if I select most of the pieces that are popping through, and then just hit the delete key, it gets rid of all that, but it keeps the piece on the outside. And then let's do the eyeball, same thing. Like technically, you actually don't see in here, so you don't need to do this for this particular thing. But it's just amazing how clever it is. Oops. And like here, I've only got 3 pieces. Let's see what happens. Delete. Yeah. So you don't actually have to select every single panel. And now this is one side, and I'm going to go to my analysis, edit this selection, or I could just do a new selection. And I think if I just, here, flip it. Okay, so there it goes. So now it's the other side, do the same process. And notice down to my little timeline down at the bottom, it's actually showing these little delete features, and that's those what I'm doing right now. It's actually part of the timeline. So let's see how little. I just got 2 pieces selected. Let's see, 1, 2. Nope. Okay, so maybe I need 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Okay, so he's one big solid body ready for a 3D print. And turn off my analysis. Oh, actually, there's one other thing I would do, is put a little radius between his fin and his body, because this doesn't look very natural. So you use the fillet. And I'll do both of these at the same time, so I'm just going to grab this. And notice it gives me an arrow, and so a lot of times if you just start pulling this out, and just keep on going until it breaks, and then back up a little bit, depending on how smooth you want it. And then now those are blended into the body. Look at that beautiful Sharky. Come on, look at him. He's so gorgeous. And don't forget to save. All right, you've made a shark in Fusion 360. Make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the buttons below. This is Brian Galassa signing out.